Do you know in every instance in the book of Acts, when the Spirit of God comes upon God's servants, called the filling of the Spirit, they speak the truth with boldness. We need more courageous people in our culture today. Today we'll be looking at how to be more courageous. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in today. Our lesson today, I'm going to read the scriptures as I get through the points here, but we're talking about courageous leading today. And, you know, one of the things I'm aware of is heroes are important. There's a song out, I meant to bring the words to it, and I left them on my desk in there. But the words of the song are, "Where is my John Wayne? Where are my heroes?" Remember that song at all? People need heroes today, and Joshua certainly qualifies as a hero for me. And the question I have for us this morning is, think about someone that you would view as being courageous. Sometimes we think of courageous in different ways, right? I think of often the firefighter who runs into a building and tries to rescue somebody who's in a very dangerous situation. I think of test pilots back in the day. I think of people who got on top of a rocket to go to the moon. Courageous people in my book. Courageous people sometimes are not given the credit they are due, at least in my book, as I see it. Having a relationship with the Lord in such a way that courageous people are highlighted. Now, sometimes we think of courageous people as being greater than us, right? But most of us, if we were put in a situation where we had to do something courageous, we would do it without thinking. I'm not sure how courageous works. I'm not courageous at all. I'll tell you a funny story, though. Maybe I've told this one before, I don't recall. One of my events, I'm going to Sims Church when I was here before. Had a Wednesday night meeting. And I get to the stop sign there at Sims. You know what I'm talking about, off Sims Road. Stop sign, there was a grocery store there on the corner. I don't know if it's still there or not. And I look to my left, and there's a sheriff's car with the doors open, and 8 or 10 middle school punks are beating up a sheriff's deputy. I wheeled my car over there without thinking, and started snatching them off and throwing them off. I had it filled with adrenaline. And I got to the bottom of the pile, and there was Jimmy Tant. You remember Jimmy Tant? I'd been in law enforcement criminal justice classes with him many years earlier. And my first response to Jimmy was, "I knew one day you'd holler out for a preacher." But back in, courage is often a misguided thing. You know, we hear about the word character, and sometimes we hear the word character, often we hear people say, character is what you do in private when nobody's looking. I disagree. It's easy to do the right thing when nobody's looking. It's hard to do the right thing when other people are looking and do the right thing anyway. That's very difficult, is it not? It is for some of us. Well, again, strong male images are important for all of us. And toxic masculinity is a myth. Certainly there are toxic people all over the world, male and female. But the point of the matter is, courage is something we should exalt. And I don't mean to sound like a sexist, but I don't want a 105-pound female going into battle on my behalf. I just don't want that. For a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is, if I'm wounded, I want somebody to carry me out. And I think that's what we have to understand, that men and women are wired differently. And we know that. There have been CT scans, studies all over the place that see how men and women respond differently to different stimuli. But courage, being courageous. Well, courageous begins because God prepares us. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I've promised to give them to the Israelites. Understanding this, the land mass that was described to Abram in Genesis has never been conquered by Israelites. It's never been fully populated by Israelites. They've never had that land. And understanding about where Joshua's coming from now, Joshua and Caleb were courageous, were they not? Remember the story? They go in to spy out the land along with 10 other guys who are apparently very afraid of their shadow. And Joshua and Caleb are the ones that come out and say, man, this place is filled with milk and honey. And the other 10 come out going, I can't believe we'll go there because they're giants in the land. We're but like grasshoppers in their sight. So they don't go into the land. What happens? 39 9/10 of a years, they wander around in the desert. And understanding this, I think we need to have a big picture of how Abram's people looked. They were not an organized people. They were essentially barbarians in many ways. They did everything the culture around them was doing and more. And so as they began being shaped, their breadth of morality is this wide. And as they began to grow and walk with God, they began to get it. Think what Moses had to deal with. 6 million people crossing the Red Sea in the face of Pharaoh's army. And they successfully do that. All these miracles have taken place, and these miracles have frightened Pharaoh to the point he says, you can get out of here and go now. Well, Israel did something a little scurrilous back in those days. They took a lot of silver and gold with them. They basically robbed the bank when they left. And Pharaoh comes after them probably because of the wealth they took with them when they left. Other reasons, I'm sure, as well. And then they get into this situation where they need a little water, and they're complaining about the manna from heaven, and God gives them what they want and has to smack them around a little bit. And think of this also. Think about going into business with your best friend, or brother or cousin. First of all, big mistake to start with. But suppose you have this person in your life that is kind of your mentor, your spokesperson, and you go up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments, and you come back down the mountain, and your spokesperson is dancing around a golden calf. Looking back, that was Aaron. Aaron created more hardship and more problems from Moses, I think, than he ever resolved. But they're this brutal people, and they're finally starting to get it. And now Joshua is on the scene. He comes back with a positive report to Moses saying, man, we need to take this land. And Joshua and Caleb are and Moses, I think, are the only 3 adult people that lived to tell the story through the desert. Every child born up until age 12 lived. But the men and the women died in massive amounts. And they get to the Jordan River, and it's time to cross. We talked a little bit about that last week. And they cross into the promised land, so to speak, and 2.5 tribes want to stay east of the Jordan. Well, God prepares his leaders. After the death of Moses, the servant of God, of the Lord, God prepares us. And sometimes I don't think we appreciate the fact that our experiences, I've said this many times, I will say it many more times, our experiences are loaned to us by God for the betterment of people around us. And when we sit on those experiences and don't share them, shame on us. God's faithfulness can be on display as we live our life of faith in our walk to those around us. And it's a very important part of our life. God prepares us for life, right? Now, how many of you can look back, all of us I'm certain can look back, to years ago and look at how our threshold was? It was way down here. Little things bothered us, little things derailed us, and now as we go through life and life's journey, life's experiences, good and bad, all of a sudden our threshold is much better, is it not? Should be. And that threshold is what I'm talking about. God can use your threshold to help people around you. Well, my next point is God keeps His promises. Now think about this. I will give you every place you set your foot as I promised Moses. This is a reiteration of the Mosaic covenant, which was part of the Abraham covenant. And so this covenant idea has been passed from Abram to Moses to Joshua, and later will be restated to David. I will give you every place where you set your foot as I promised Moses. Now again, the point of this passage here is, for us today, is this. Well, let me go ahead and read the rest of it. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, from the great river Euphrates, all to the Hittite country, to the great sea on the west. Now when you hear people in protest today, you'll hear them saying, from the river to the sea. You've heard that on TV? You've heard people saying that? What they're saying is God's covenant is invalid to you, it belongs to us. That's precisely what they're saying. And I would encourage us not to be wooed into some sense of complacency about what they're saying. They're not just saying the land belongs to them, they're saying God's covenant belongs to them. And that's a big deal. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. The promise thread continues through the life of Moses to Joshua. And his promises, think about this, it's not unlike the New Testament promises when Jesus says, lo, I will be with you always, even unto the end of the age. It's not unlike his promise when he says, no, I will never leave you or forsake you. And one of the valuable points that we can get from the Old Testament is the proof of God's faithfulness over and over and over again. And also, we can learn from the consequences of living a life not being faithful. Now, we're not going to necessarily go into captivity like they did then, but we can understand how our soul can be dried up and how we can feel empty and void and pointless and meaningless when we don't walk with God. That's a natural consequence of straying away from what God values. God keeps His promises. He always has, and He always will. Well, what are some of His promises? Well, John 3:16. We can't change that. God's love for us is so big and so broad that His grace reaches down to us and provides us the same living water that the woman at the well received in John 4. So you'll never thirst again. The bread of heaven, we're going to talk about that in communion. We celebrate communion because what are we doing? When we celebrate communion, what are we doing? We are looking to the past and celebrating God's work in the past, in history past, and we're looking forward to the future when He comes again. We celebrate when we'll celebrate with Him in person. God keeps His promises. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. Does that mean that we're going to be, nobody can stand up to us? Tell that to the 40-some global church people in Nigeria that were slaughtered a week or two ago by Islamists, terrorists, that came into their church during the service and started shooting them, mowing them down. No, what it means is this: God's promises are always true, come death or life. And let me offer this. God has never promised you or me a long life. He hasn't done that. And I have had too many funerals for young people. maybe too many to even count. Breaks my heart every time. But God has not promised those things to us. What He has promised is His indwelling Spirit will comfort us during our trials, our tribulations, during our difficulties, and He will always be with us. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In every way acknowledge Him, and He shall make your path smoother. And my final point is obedience precedes blessing. You know, we sing the song, "Trust and Obey, there's no other way," right? But we don't always grasp that God requires us to yield willfully to Him to be in the place of blessing. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their fathers to give him. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from the left or to the right, that you may be successful where you go. Now let me offer a caveat here. God is not saying for us to keep the law. Jesus fulfilled the law for us. He completed the law. What He is saying here to us, to translate this into New Testament language, is live according to Scripture. Live according to Scripture. Love your enemies. We talked about that last week. Love your neighbor. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commands. You will live by my words, Jesus says. There's no way we can keep the law, and it's futile to even try. And we have a category problem when people say, well, you got to keep the Ten Commandments. Well, I hope people don't violate the Ten Commandments, but you can't keep you and I can't keep the Ten Commandments. It's impossible. We will have another God before our living God before the day's over. It may be just simply me wanting my way. All of a sudden, I've elevated myself to God. Who knows what it'll be? But the point is, God says live by grace. And let me just touch on this briefly. When we say keep the law, our default position on keeping the law is the Ten Commandments, right? That's our default position. Jesus does not make that category distinction. He refers to everything in the Old Testament as the law. He refers to the prophets as law. He refers to history as law. He refers to the Pentateuch as law. So if we're going to keep the Ten Commandments, we need to make sure we keep all the law, including the sacrificial law. We need to reestablish the temple. And God calls that anathema. Galatians 5 says, if you think you can keep the law, look at what the law does. And he goes on and lists all these horrible, profane things that people do trying to keep the law. Obedience precedes blessing. And sometimes we expect the blessing without the obedience. And God says, trust and obey. Father in heaven, thank you for tuning in to Horns Church today. If this message has been helpful, feel free to give us a call at 252-237-4616. We'd be glad to talk with you about this or anything else related to your spiritual journey. God bless you and have a courage-filled week.